Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Good Deeds Note Investing Podcast. I am your co-host with my fellow co-host, Chris Seveney. Chris, I feel like it's been a while since we've been on together. And today we are joined by Justin Bogard of BrightPath Notes. Chris, Justin, how are you guys doing today?
Hey, Justin.
I'm doing fantastic. It's Friday, and I got to watch the new Space Jam movie with my kids this morning. So that was kind of my fun thing I got to do today.
Cool.
Nice.
Yes, it is Friday, and Jamie, big weekend, right? You remember?
It is your birthday, Chris, right?
Yes, it is. So I get the USPS thing every morning for what's coming in the mail, and I still haven't seen, the delivery ticket for my new Porsche. So, I know it's not coming to UPS. If it is, it's probably gonna get lost. But I'll be waiting this weekend. Don't worry.
I'll send you something before this episode airs. How about that?
That's fine. So,
Jamie's sending you a Mattel Porsche.
So probably, or if this is being recorded, if it wasn't, I'd probably get the single finger salute right about now. But that's okay. Being the former military man he is, so
Exactly.
So, but I digress all the time. But Justin, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and let the listeners know a little bit about your company.
Sure. So my name's Justin Bogard. I live kind of close to Indianapolis, Indiana. It's actually LaPel, Indiana. It's a small town of about 3,000 people. And so together with me and my wife, we've got 4 kids, all under the age of 10. So you can imagine that's why I have no hair if you're watching this on video. I can't grow hair because I keep losing it. And so I got... Yeah, I grow it down here on my face. I don't grow it so well on top of my head. So it's all the wrestling with the kids, getting the carpet rug burn on the head. I think that's what wears out.
Well, at those ages, I guess you're still winning the wrestling matches for a couple more years, right?
You would think that. I may not admit that on camera, but there's a few struggling moments with some of them because they get aggressive. But anyway, so I've been in real estate for about 5 or 6 years now. Specifically in the note space. I was just like one of those guys that was watching HGTV and was seeing all these cool flips and was like, how are they making all this money? I'm not that smart. I could probably do this, right? Because they don't look that smart either. And I found out how challenging it was. And so then I learned about note investing quickly after that by one of my mentors, coming to town and teaching about it. And I just really got turned on to the idea of being the bank and just investing passively and not having to deal with tenants, toilets, and trash or contractors. And I was like, my life will be so much simpler doing this. And so I just changed my whole investing mantra over to notes. And fast forward to today, I'm mainly in performing loans. I do a ton of seller financing where we buy seller finance loans, and we also help create them for our own inventory as well. And that's kind of where we landed today. So we educate a lot, similar to you guys, to our local community and across the country. And we broadcast monthly to kind of showcase our experiences with this note investing. And, we have our own podcast as well. Haven't had you on, Jamie, but we had Chris on not too long ago.
Yeah, share the name of your podcast as well so people know where they're looking for information, because we do have a lot of people who are interested in the seller financing component as well.
Yeah, so it's called The Two Wealth Show. The podcast doesn't focus mainly on note investing specifically. It's like kind of how to grow your wealth, or what's the best way to put your wealth to work inside of real estate. And so one of my co-hosts is a short-term rental expert. And so she talks a lot about short-term rentals, and I bring the note value to it. And we just, talk about how people start. Right? Super E, that's right.
See, there you go. See, I listen sometimes.
All right. You're my second subscriber then, huh?
Nice.
I always joke with people on Facebook when they talk about how to build wealth quickly, and I always please, people, don't take this the wrong way, but my first impression is, because I always just post, I'm like, marry into it.
Yeah.
Just marry into it, and you'll get a chuckle out of people. So I had a few questions, because I wanted to kind of jump into seller financing, and when you were just talking about that, one, if you're willing to share, I was curious who your mentor was my first question, if you were willing to share that and if they still mentor. And secondly is, being in a rural Indiana, is a lot of your deals in Indiana? Do you go outside of Indiana? Kind of what's your target focus?
Great question. First and foremost is my mentor that got me in the business and has helped me numerous times. His name is Eddie Speed.
Okay. Yep.
And he's been in the business for, I'm sure you guys know him, 40 plus years. And
Yep.
he's got people that he's mentored and taught that are very high level. And those are also my mentors as well. And so just starting with the community that he built for his educational program is where I started. And I branched off to, others as well that helps me along in specific topics in the note space. And the seller financing question
been on
you
our
asked.
podcast as well. Just sorry to cut you off, but just recommend listeners
Eddie?
go back and listen to that one. Eddie's been on our podcast. Yep. So that was a really good episode.
You cannot walk away without learning something when Eddie talks, even if it's for 10 seconds.
Yeah.
He just adds so much value to whatever you do. I don't just invest in Indiana. I am lucky to find notes in Indiana because I live here. A lot of people know me now that I've branded myself here in the region. So I do get some deals just by happenstance, but we find most of our deals just, doing old fashioned direct mail type of campaigns. We'll purchase a mailing list and stuff and get into deals that way. I like to invest in the blue collar areas, the Midwestern states and some of the Southern states. And that's where we find a lot of our inventory and where we end up investing. So you won't probably see me in New York and New Jersey or California. I'll probably land in the more, unpaid balances that are in the 60K and below range.
So similar where I play, I stay out California, New York, New Jersey. Jamie doesn't like New Jersey after getting his ticket there recently, driving through it.
Two of them, by the way.
So I have another question, and I'm just, I'll keep jumping in and jumping over Jamie. You mentioned you reach out by direct mailing.
I'm used to it.
Yeah, he is. So you mentioned direct mail, and one of the things people sometimes get caught up in is, okay, direct mail, I know you have to keep repeatedly doing it, without, getting too into the details. I mean, roughly how many letters do you send out? Do you create them yourself? Do you have a third party? What do you spend per month? What's kind of your hit rate? And again, I think one of the things that probably based on what you said, that's given you an added benefit is sounds like you've branded yourself in certain areas. So when people know or say, oh, this is a perfect deal for Justin, they probably go your way, kind of similar to something I had with a seller on CFDs of all these hairy CFDs. They're like, oh, this is a Seveney loan, and so forth, or a Seveney tape. So just curious, from that perspective on that reach out, how that, what's that process and kind of some information on that.
So yeah, just starting a business in general, you obviously have to get out and let the word be known of exactly what you do and the value add you can provide to somebody. And since there's very few people in the note space like ourselves that, brand ourselves as note investors to go to, it's you're not going to step over a lot of competition. So it's really a niche business. And a lot of people remember that, oh, that was something unique that Justin said. He's in real estate, but he doesn't actually own the real estate. I wonder if this would fit for him. And so that's, doing that over the past several years, I've, people understand and realize and kind of come to my direction as far as, finding me in a RIA club or, on the internet or locally, and somebody knows a real estate investor, like, yeah, Justin does land contracts or note mortgages, and you ask him. So that's definitely one helpful feed. And to ask your question about direct mail. So I typically send out about 1,000 to 1,500 letters at a time when I do direct mail. And the response is pretty good as far as what I consider the open rate. I'd say I get at least, like a 10% open rate. And what I consider open rate is someone's looking at our envelope and they open the mail and they read the letter and they just, pick up the phone and call us out of curiosity and be like, why the heck are you sending me a letter? I don't understand what a note is. They ask me all those fun questions. And from there, I think we can usually close. Let's say we send out 1,000 letters, we may get 75 to 100 phone calls, and
that's awesome.
Of those phone calls, they get weeded out pretty quickly. Okay, yeah. There's a couple of F-bombs that get dropped, perhaps, or why are you bothering me? So you weed through that, and then you can thin it down to about 20 people that you're talking to that are semi-serious, and of that, maybe about 10 people are able to get a quote. You're able to get a quote to them, and then of that, you should be able to get a couple of deals, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 deals out of that. The selling cycle is long. It's not like receiving a tape, going through it, putting your bid in, do you pass or fail? It's not that quickly. It's a very long selling cycle, so you have to be patient, and the patient man wins.
Interesting. So what kind of I'm sure it varies wildly. What kind of a discount do you typically get on a note like that?
Well, you can imagine these notes that are created by what I call mom and pop sellers
Yeah.
are not written the same way as like a bank
Right.
or a fund would,
Yeah.
would write their
Yeah.
notes. So there are many,
Sure.
many challenges within this document that you need to sift through and
Absolutely.
fix. So the discounts can range anywhere from 20% to even close to 50% off of whatever current balance is, even for performing loans. And also depends on how motivated the seller is. I mean, I tell people all the time, the best deals I've ever done are seller finance deals, but they're the most work too, because they need a lot of help to bring them back up to a level that you and I can sell them at to somebody that's a first timer that, needs something more turnkey.
Sure. Yeah. You're adding value to the asset by doing that. That makes sense.
Brought up a good point there too. Like Jamie and I got sent a seller finance deal from somebody last week who I've done deals with, and they do a lot of seller financing like yourself. And I was just reading, it was a land contract, and I was just reading the land contract, and unfortunately it's in Illinois, and I'm just looking at it, I'm like, I will basically they're delinquent, but they're trying to, and the just the way it was written, and I'm just reading it, this is going to be like almost impossible if they go delinquent to try and take this thing back. So I think they got it under contract for a decent price, but it was still probably more than what I would even be willing to pay, because it's just so much hair on, just because it's a land contract. There's still a lot of devil in the details, what I think people need to understand. Like you mentioned, these are written by people who probably gotten one off of Facebook or somewhere else. Very rarely were they written by an actual attorney.
Yeah. And even the ones written by attorney, you can poke holes in it pretty far. Because I'm sure you guys seen, thousands of loans by now and documents to where it's easy to poke holes in some of the stuff. So I look at them, I'll kind of browse through it quickly, but I'll send it off to somebody that just kind of really knows documents well. And and I found a resource for them to just look things over for me and poke holes in it to save me on time. Right. But it is funny when you look at stuff and it's like they got their amortizations wrong. They don't have a maturity date in there or a beginning date, or they're trying to add taxes and insurance into a full payment and not breaking out P&I. It's like I would say probably 9 times out of 10, I'm amending that contract before I even buy it. And I'll have the original lender and the borrower both sign it to move forward. So I already know that ahead of time. And build that into my cost, right?
So what does your kind of buy box look like? I mean, do you have kind of a threshold as far as principal balance or minimum number of payments made, or does that really vary?
It does vary a lot. And you guys know there's 6 or 7 values we can all agree on that values a note before we'd even buy it. And those same rules apply to seller financing. So I bought a loan with 1 month seasoning. And that was because it was a $50,000 down payment on a $50,000 note. So I didn't see a lot of risk in it. So I bought it, and it still paid off pretty well. I've also seen a note to where it had like hardly any down payment, basically zero, but I needed to see at least 2 years of seller financing pay history for me to believe that borrower was really vested in staying in that property. And I bought deals that way. So there's a lot of things that weigh into my calculation. So I don't have a steadfast rule, but I don't know. I'm a gunslinger. So I kind of look at a deal and I get a feeling about, do I like this or not? Something's off about this. Chris and I talked about it before. You can just look at something and something's off about it, and you just walk away from it because it's going to be a problem. Because I'm lucky I don't have to be desperate enough to buy a deal. I can pick and choose what I want now since I have more inventory to choose from.
So before you hopped on, I told Jamie, I'm like, I really like this guy. And Jamie's laughing because now Jamie's like, this guy's just like Chris.
He's just like Chris.
And what we mean by that, and I'll go a little detail, because people call me a gunslinger as well in certain details, but you hit the nail on the head. I want to jump through and give you a hug right now, because no, you talk about risk, and people just put everything into a box and never measure the risk. And, a $50,000 note, people bid it all the same. Well, a $50,000 note with a $50,000 down payment on newly originated, compared to a $50,000 note with a $2,000 down payment, you're going to bid that differently, even though the numbers are, 90% of them are all the same. Same thing like on some of the newer stuff that has lower down payment, you do want to see that 12 or 24 months, because that does have an impact And I find too many people in this business are like, oh, I got a calculator, I just put everything in and it does what it tells me. It's like, well, no, that's one part of it, aspect of it, but you completely ignored risk. And from that perspective. So that's why I just wanted to kind of digress a little bit more on that. So
yeah. I think every note has the numbers and a story, and there's art and science to evaluating every deal. So it makes a lot of sense. Were you going to say something, Chris?
Nope. I'll let you go. I'll let you step in.
So what is your, what does your kind of portfolio look like today, or how do you kind of, what's your plan with with each note that you buy? Are you brokering notes? How are you exiting most of your deals? What's your focus right now?
Great questions. So the portfolio right now as it stands is 100% performing. We haven't bought non-performing in a few years for our portfolio. There's been a couple of people that we've sold non-performers to that are seasoned enough to handle it. So we typically don't want to walk a deal with somebody that's non-performing, especially their first time. We just don't like that model as much. I know a lot of people do that. I just don't. It doesn't fit what I do. I love the performing part of it. So through COVID, we were very fortunate. We had excellent underwriting because of the pay history, and we didn't see a glitch in our radar for any of our portfolio. Out of our investors' portfolio that we manage and see, we probably have about 75 to 80 notes that we see pretty easily. And we had about 3 that I can think of that even had a problem during COVID. And again, because we made sure that we vetted those pay histories very strongly to ensure, a quality tenant or borrower, so to speak, so that they would have a problem in cases like this. So that's kind of our portfolio, the way it looks right now. Our intention on what we do with an asset that we buy is really based on where that debt came from, if it was debt. So in our company portfolio, we obviously have cash, and we have debt service that we have as well to buy loans with. And then on our retirement accounts, those are a little bit different. So I'll probably put more conservative investments in my retirement account and my wife's account and like our kids' trust accounts and stuff. Just because I'm playing the longer play there. I'm not trying to aggressively manage that account. I just wanted to set it and forget it. And then in my company account and and when we work with investors, we go at a different direction because we can be more aggressive with it. Now we don't buy really aggressive notes that are performing per se, but we can just take on a little bit more risk, like what we talked about earlier.
Yeah, makes sense.
So it sounds like, because here's my question I was going to go to, you really don't have many, if any, loans that are performing that typically go full non-performing. They may miss a payment here and there, and you'll work with them and stuff, but what if you had a percentage? It seems like it would probably be very low of the loans that were performing that flat out just go 100% non-performing that you may have to either sell or take legal action on. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, exactly. We've been very fortunate. I'd say probably 2 out of 100 that I can think of have gone south, either that we've owned or that we've sold to an investor or helped buy for an investor. But then again, we were very well protected, or they were very well protected in the event that this would happen, to where there's a ton of security for them, to where they probably don't feel like they're going to even come close to what they have into it. So it'll be above what they have into it.
Okay. Now, one of the things that I've heard about seller financing, of part of kind of the due diligence that I think is, there's the underwriting component, but what I see a lot of times on sometimes these seller financing deals is inflated property value, where the property is really worth like 60 or 70 grand, and they're writing $100,000 note because they're trying to get that note to basically be comparable with rents and so forth. Is that a true statement, or am I just kind of being a media person? Like one little thing happens and it just gets blown out of proportion.
Everything happens with seller financing. These people get very creative. We've had people that said, I'm going to write a 0% note, but I'm going to put $25,000 above purchase price to cover my interest, right? So they don't have to pay taxes on it. Yeah. And we've got people that think they're going to outsmart the government and stuff. So we've seen all sorts of weird things. So yes, there are probably, I'd say more times than not, they end up selling the property just a little bit above what they should. But most of the time it's pretty on par. And with today's appreciation going up, I haven't really seen a lot of underwater land contract or note mortgages that are seller financing. So
Okay. Are most of yours notes, or are they mostly contract for deeds or land contracts?
they're mostly land contracts.
Okay.
You know, I harp on people all the time in my local area about, you know, don't write land contracts. You need to write note mortgage or deed of trust, whatever state you're in, and don't write land contract. I said, there is a time and a place to write a land contract, but if it's, you know, if you don't have debt underneath it, you should be writing a note mortgage. And like, why do you buy land contracts? I go, well, that's a good question, because the deals are too good to pass up, you know? Like, and then I can convert them, you know, as you guys know,
Right. Yeah.
if I want to, I can convert them and add more value to them. But it's just the culture of the Midwest is everybody thought land contract was the right thing to do because they could evict or forfeit, you know, have the borrower be forfeited their contract. And we all know that judges are not going down that route very often. So.
Yeah, I found, again, you know, I'm not really heavy into the land contracts anymore, but I still have 100 in my portfolio. But, you know, I know, for example, back in the day, Ohio and Indiana used to be, you know, land contract country, essentially, because you could do the forfeiture, and Ohio gets lengthy and expensive to foreclose. Indiana, same thing. Michigan, Michigan, honestly, I mean, there is some redemption rights in Michigan, but I didn't really think it was that much of a difference, honestly, in Michigan from that process. But one of the things where I see people kind of get is you start getting into some of the non-judicial states just south of you, Missouri and some of these other states, they're writing these land contracts, and actually I found that it's faster to foreclose with a mortgage and note because a lot of these courts don't really understand land contracts, and it's a non-judicial state that you'd be able to foreclose anyways in 90 or 120 days. But I think people, again, go online or have some guru say, oh, do land contract, land contract, land contract, no matter where you are. And, there's certain states like Iowa, if it's not recorded, it's like $200 a day penalty from when the date it's originated. Maryland has some pretty crazy laws as well. But, do you see that kind of in the Midwest where, like you mentioned, people just sometimes just fall in love with a land contract and don't know what the reason why they even did one?
Yeah, it's culture. It's all driven by the old guys that did it before them, right? Who they learned from. And that's what we're trying to get rid of. We're trying to wash that mentality out and let people understand, like, you can write a land contract. It's still an enforceable document. It's just not the best document for the lender. I feel that you're a lot better off not being on that deed. So that's why I love the note and mortgage. So, but we have way more land contracts in our portfolio than we do note and mortgages. So.
Yeah, Chris and I have converted a bunch of ours. Yeah. So
I just got an updated water bill for the one I have. I think it's up to like $26,000 on one of the properties. So
the water bill, they just leave the water on for 2 years?
Yeah, no, they haven't paid it, I think, since 2009 or something like that.
Well, that is one thing I will say about land contracts. They do give a lot more podcast material, generally speaking.
They do. They get a lot more press than no mortgage.
Hold on,
exactly. So, you're gonna
23, 359.97. So actually, I don't want to. But here's the other thing I hate about land contracts. When I go to a post office box, okay, all this is like tax bills and everything of land contracts. Right. So it's like
assessors.
Yeah.
So I'm curious.
We got a.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. I was gonna say we got a letter in the mail last week from a satellite company wanting to throw down a dish or one of their towers on the property that I had the land contract on, thinking that I was the owner of it. I'm just laughing, going, "Oh, that'd be great to get extra $400 or $500 a month just leasing that sucker on there." It's just funny what you get in the mail for being on the deed. So,
oh yeah.
So you said you do also originate some owner finance deals. Can you walk through an example for us?
Yeah, one of the last deals I did was it's actually a fun case study, so I'll try to be quick with it. I know we're limited on time, and it was a piece of land that I bought in Florida in one of my retirement accounts. It was a really small retirement account, and I did this back in like 2017. I had forgot about it because when I first got it, I was like, "Oh, cool! I'm going to be able to put a sign in the yard, and someone's going to buy this piece of land from me." And I found out I overpaid for that piece of land. I overpaid by a few $1,000s on this piece of land. And so I didn't really get anybody to jump on it. They wanted to lowball me, and I'm like, oh, this sucks. And then so I moved on with my life, and I had forgot about it for a couple of years. And then I remember I was like, oh my God, I have this account here. I'm not even leveraging this account and building it up. It's just sitting there with a piece of land in Florida. I'm just paying taxes on it every year. And then I thought, why don't I seller finance that? And I just figured out that there was a special Facebook marketplace in the area where this piece of land was. I just put an advertisement there, just like anyone else selling seller financing down there, and just did the same, type of description and plotted the 4 points around the lot and stuff. And sure enough, I was getting flooded with Facebook Messenger messages about, I'll do seller financing. I was doing like $1,000 down, and it was like a $6,500 note, pretty small. And then I ended up finding somebody and going through the closing process and got that cash flowing as creating a note. And then I end up selling that note to somebody else after I, seasoned it for like 5 or 6 months, end up actually making a profit on it. So if somebody paid cash for that piece of land, I would have lost $2,000. Instead, I seller financed it, worked my way out of this problem, and I actually ended up making about $1,500 on that deal. It took me 4 or 5 years to do it, but I got smarter as I was in the note business.
From a percent
So anyways,
standpoint, though, that's pretty good.
Yeah. So it's great to have that tool in your tool belt to be able to work your way out of a kind of a problem, because everyone, well, I should say everyone, most people are needing seller financing because they're just not bank financeable because of the box is so narrow right now to fit in there. Unless you got a great down payment or an exceptional credit history, you're going to be struggling to get financial help for these, properties lower than 150K. But we'll help other investors that find properties and they want to sell them to a borrower, and we'll help them vet it and flip them over to an RMLO. And if they're in Indiana, we obviously have attorneys that can write note and mortgages, pretty quickly. So, but we'll do deals like that for ourselves, and then also for other people as well.
What type of credit scores typically when you originate notes do you see the people in range? Because one thing that when I've originated certain things, it was credit score is one thing. I mean, it's important, but really it comes down to their ability to repay, because people go through a lot of different things in life, whether, some people get divorced, which can kill their credit, and then they get cleaned up. So again, it goes back to, you got to look at each one uniquely and stuff, but I was just curious, what you're seeing from some of your originated stuff.
100% aligned with your thinking. Ability to repay is my exact words I tell everybody, and don't worry about the credit score as much. 500 is the lowest that the RMLO will say you should be in compliant with the loan, but we'll see them from 550 to 650 pretty commonly.
So, I don't even know what's good anymore. I don't know. Was 650 good, or I don't know? Didn't they go from like 800 to 900? Didn't they bump it up by 100 points or something? Some point in time.
If you have 800, you're pretty exceptional in the credit world. Is that right, Jamie?
Yeah. 800 is definitely very good for sure. No, but I think you hit on a key point, Justin, which is it's just one more tool in your tool belt, because who knows what the economy is going to bring, what market conditions are going to be for note investors or real estate investors. But now you're able to originate a note. If you have to take back a property, whether through a non-performer or something else, you're not stuck. And that's one thing I love about this whole space is that, you can think creatively and figure out a way out, but now you've been down that road, how to originate notes. And so I think that's just one more tool that you have. So
I was going to ask, curiosity from sourcing deals over the past, call it 12, 15 months with COVID. Has it increased, decreased? They're just curious, more people looking maybe to liquidate certain assets during this time, or, just curious from your business. I know ours has been hit or miss over the past 15 months. I'm just curious with yours, if you've seen in sourcing product, has it gotten better, worse, or stayed about the same?
Well, it's gotten a little worse for me. My usual sources of inventory, they've kind of dried up a little bit for, we'll say, performing loans. They've got a little bit heavier on non-performing right now, which is nice to see. So I've had to kind of shift my business and get back to sending out messages to those mom and pops to buy their land contracts and note and mortgages. So I've been heavy into marketing to them, which has helped my inventory challenge. But also, too, I've had people reach out to me during COVID wanting to buy their loan back or to sell their loan, figure out how to sell their loan. And then I started figuring out, well, why don't I just buy a partial of their loan? And so once I walked through the deal with them and showed them the numbers, like I was able to to get the requirement of return that I want from them by not buying the entire loan because the discount would be too big. And then I'd buy a piece of it today and then give them the rest of the money in the future and actually give them more than what they have into it as well. So when we run the numbers for them, it definitely meets their ROI.
Yep.
And then for us, it meets our requirement, and we've got less money into the asset. And then we also got a lot shorter time period as well. So we've been finding ways to do that.
So when you do originate a note, what is it? Do you do it on a 10, 15, 20-year term? What's typically the longest you'll go on a term? What's average interest rate that you see or that you try and push for? Is there certain standards or certain boxes you try and fill in? I mean, I've been told in the past you go minimum 10-10-10 rule, which is 10% down, 9.9% interest rate over 10 years. Just curious if that's really, again, something people follow. And again, I know every deal is kind of unique and different to try and make payments work and so forth, but I was curious if there's kind of a ballpark or a range where you like to play in. Great
question. In the 10-10-10 rule, usually the bigger wholesalers know that rule, and that's what they stick by when they do seller financing, which is it's a fine model as long as the borrower can make those payments.
Yeah.
Well, we're typically seeing with the professionals writing the agreements. Let's say if it's under 50K, you're probably going to see rates in between 8 to 11% interest rates. Yep. And then over that, they start, the interest rate obviously is going to tear down a little bit by, every $15,000, $20,000 in principal balance.
Yep.
But when I'm creating loans, it really depends on the story. So that small piece of land that I sold, I had 11% interest rate on it. I could have got 14. I probably could have went higher, but what the numbers are so small, it doesn't really matter. I just found that 11 just made sense. So back to the gunslinger thing, I just kind of throw a dart and be like, that number just makes sense, and that's what I'm going to do. But I think legally you want to stay around probably easily the 6 to 9% window for an interest rate in general. Again, if you're doing $1 million mortgage, I don't think it makes sense to do a 9% interest rate, right? You have to be reasonable and understand, someone's going to be paying that debt back and want them to be able to pay that. So, it's really a sliding scale for me, but I'm typically landing in the 7 to 9% window pretty easily creating notes.
Yeah. And it's one thing just for everyone listening, make sure you run it by your attorney if you're going to do this, because states do have usury laws. For example, Pennsylvania, I think the max you can go is 6%. So, there used to be a lot of loans originating back in the day in Pennsylvania that were 9 and 10%. Harbor got in a little bit of hot water back in the day, I believe, for having to adjust or refinance a lot of those or convert them. And people who had bought loans from Harbor were on phones with the Attorney General, I believe, working through. Actually, I know one investor who was kind of sharing the story with me. So, be careful on the state, because I think Ohio also has some, some usury laws as well. I'm not sure what it is. I thought it was like 9 or 10, but
for both of you, what's the highest interest rate you've ever bought that was on a note that you bought?
12.
Mine has been 14.
Mine was 14.385. We actually lowered it because of the usury laws in Missouri, and then all of a sudden we were, the borrowers loved us too. So.
I would say people listening to this, if you're trying to lend on real estate and you're trying to get as much interest as you can, you cannot be greedy. You can't be greedy on interest. You just need to do what's fair. And, if you buy the property for $50,000 and it's worth $75,000, you don't understand your yield is way better than you think. Right.
If
you resell even at 6 or 5%, your yield's looking very good. And so you have to remember what you have into it.
And when you plug it into an amortization table, it's similar to like yields on returns on some notes. If it's like a $20,000 or $30,000 loan, 0.5% or percent really doesn't move the needle. And again, now over 100 loans, 1% on every single one, of course that moves the needle. But for investors who have $20,000 to $40,000 that putting in, and that's their one deal, to make the numbers work, 0.5% or a percent really is not going to, it's not going to change your life dramatically, I guess is what I would say from that perspective.
For sure. So Justin, I'm just curious, what does your what does your typical day look like, and how's your business set up? I know you have kids, so your day may be difficult to predict, but is it just you, or how does what does a day look like or a week look like for you as a note investor?
That's a great question. I haven't been asked that in a while, but how I work is I get most of my highly functional work done, just me brain work wise, in the morning part of the day, the first half of the day, and the last half of the day, I usually set up meetings and stuff. So I'm waking up before anyone else in the house, and I'm just going to in my office for a couple hours, and I'll get work done. I'll come in and have breakfast, share time with the kids over the summer break because they're home, right? And just hang out with them for a little bit. And then I'll go back out in the office and work until lunch. And then depending on my schedule, if I'm filming or we're recording something or doing live, and then I'll set meetings toward the end of the day. So I'll do like, Chris and I talked about this before. I'll hit my due diligence early in the morning. Like I set aside time to where I'm not bothered. I'm totally focused on underwriting deals and evaluating, my business and stuff. It's just me as the employee of the company, but I have several virtual assistants, and I partner with other investors and collaborate. And we have different entities that we can collaborate in. So I do have other partners that I lean on and stuff for support, but I rely heavily on vendors and my other collaborating partners to do some of the workload for me. I'm not a specialist in everything. There's certain things I do really well and certain things I don't have a business doing, So like looking over land contracts, like I said before, I have someone else that looks them over because I don't trust myself. There's too many times where I've missed things. I'd be like, I didn't even know that was important. So I'm like, you obviously know what's important. I want you to look it over and tell me what's wrong with it. So I'm happy to pay somebody else to look through something that I'm not a specialist in. So
what do you use for a workflow? What software do you use?
So I have a Microsoft Office 365 account just for the basic tools and functions of just running a business, right? And then, so inside of my Podio CRM, I have a custom built software that I think you guys might use too.
I use it. I was, I use. Richard's been on our podcast as well. No Rules.
Yeah.
So
I mainly use that. It's great for me because it's almost like a really good checklist of walking through from A to Z when I look at a note for when I'm trying to deal with stuff in post closing and getting my intern payments and recording documents. So we use it as a CRM as well. So that's kind of my world right now is using that software to run the note business. And then for my communication with my team, we use like the Microsoft Teams software so that we have like a control of every message that goes through, and we can find a conversation very easily, or we do standard operating tasks. We build that so someone else can pick up where we left off at. And that's how we're kind of running the business.
Yeah, I've just switched from the Google platform over to Microsoft in May 19th, because that's when all my emails. Well, that's when all my emails are dated in OneDrive, because I set up because I had my personal OneDrive. I moved everything, but we don't need to talk about that. Justin, I have a question. Have you been on vacation lately?
Yeah, I have.
Okay, no, because I just realized that Jamie and I are like as white as ghosts, and you're nice and tan. And I'm sitting here thinking, this guy's in Indiana. How the hell does he get a tan in Indiana? So I just had to ask, because I was going to say, Jamie and I, we got to be doing something wrong, because this guy's working from home,
we're
nice and tan.
It's the lighting. I have the tent turned up high on the camera to make myself glow a little bit more.
So.
Chris, you're getting ready to go on vacation, aren't you, Chris?
I am. I'm going. Yeah, leaving on my wife's birthday to go to the Virgin Islands. So that'll be a nice little vacation. We haven't been anywhere since I think last August. So, but I'll tell you all about it. Trust me, Jimmy, when I get back.
I'm sure you will.
As we get to wrap up, Justin, typically, as we wrap up our episodes, we like to try and give people a note and bolt, which is something like a little just tidbit, and you've already given us a lot of them. But if there's kind of a lesson learned or something you see, a common mistake you see a lot of people make in this industry on doing something wrong, this kind of just a thing, something along those lines that we share. I didn't know if you had anything. And if not, we'll jump it over to Jamie and he can come up with one. I don't have mine yet. I got to think of one, so I'll pause. But if you have one, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I think I work with a lot of first-time investors, which is fun for me, and that's what I love about what I do right now, to kind of show them what I believe is the right way to do things. And the two biggest hangups that people have when they first get in the business is, number one, they don't feel comfortable buying something that's not in their backyard. when they're buying an asset like this alone. And then number two is they are so focused on the ROI or the yield on the investment that they don't understand what they really have. And so I kind of show people to put blinders on at first and be like, don't worry about where it's at and don't worry about what the return is. Look at what you have in front of you. Like Chris, we talked about risk, earlier. It's like, look at this deal. Yeah, I know it's a 3% interest rate and I know you're getting a pretty good discount. It may not be like a double-digit return, but if you're getting a 6, 7, 8% return on it at full maturity, you don't understand this sucker's going to pay off early. I don't know how or when, but it's going to pay off early and you're going to get a big pop, and that pop is going to shoot your yield way up. So don't get hung up on yield is what I tell people. Just focus on, look at this asset. You have a solid investment. You have a very low risk in this versus what you could have been. And the return is going to work itself out because you guys know, you've been in the business long enough. These loans never go to full maturity. They're always paying off somehow or some way. So.
I mean, I'm saying Jamie's a homeowner. Justin, if you're a homeowner, how many of us over the last 5 years had, refinanced our loan? I mean, most people have during that time, and most people, or you've moved. I mean, if I looked at 20 people around me and in the last 10 years, how many of them how many have either refinanced or moved?
Moved. Four times.
Yeah.
So 4 times in the last 3 years.
Yeah. And granted, I'm sure your credit is much higher than your borrowers, but in the same token, they have a lot of changes in life circumstances where they can improve. I mean, the economy isn't going well up until COVID, so things have been well. And even now, it's still pretty strong and housing has increased. So people, look at these rates of 8% they're getting or 7%. It gives them incentive to refinance. That's why one of the things I don't like to buy loans is 0% because the person has zero. There's no pop because the person's never going to probably refinance. They're going to move. But when it's at like 7 or 8%, there's a greater chance once they clean their stuff up that they can go get a loan for 3.5%, 4.5%.
So Justin, were those live-in flips, or why did you move so many times?
When I gotten divorced back in 2015, 2016. And I obviously moved out of the house that we lived in and got into another one. And what I wanted to do is, my dad and I saw this house in this area called Fishers, and we're like, oh, cool. This was right before the real estate got hot to where the prices were out of control. And we found this and we thought we could put some money into it and just flip it real quick while I could, live somewhere else. And this is why I don't do flips, because I made this thing look like exactly how I wanted to live there. And there was no way in hell that I was selling that thing. So I ended up living in that house. And then when I did sell it after a few years, when I met my future wife, I ended up, making a good amount of money on it. So it just catapulted me to this next house. And that was too small for 6 of us. So then we had to move into another house. And then we got a dog and a cat now. So I don't know if we're going to be moving again or not. I hope not. I'm tired of moving. Yeah, so a couple of them were live-in flips.
Gotcha. Okay, I was just curious. So my note and bolt I'm gonna piggyback on something you already said today, Justin. But that is that don't be afraid to outsource. Don't be afraid to go to the experts. You said you have people who do, I guess, collateral review for you. You don't need to be the expert. You probably shouldn't be the expert on too many things. If you are, you're probably doing something wrong, to be honest. It's really, really difficult to scale a note business or any other business if you're the expert on each facet of the business. So my note and bolt is be open to outsourcing and going to the experts for different pieces of your business.
No, that's very I'm going to tag off on that one, because mine was going to be, remind this episode, I have a land contract in Indiana. And, we didn't pick up at the time we bought this that the legal description in the land contract is the wrong legal description on the property. So it has the right property address, but wrong legal description. And when the borrower had defaulted, they were about 5 months behind. So I sent to the attorney and said, hey, can we send a demand? And all of a sudden they looked at it and said, and the paralegal's like, no, because it's got the wrong legal description on it. And I was like, oh man. So, but, I just didn't give up. So I went and asked, an attorney who I run everything by. And I said, okay, if you're in a situation where you have a land contract that has the right property address, the person's living in the property, but just has the wrong legal description, what would you do? And he basically said, well, you could do quiet title and, so forth and so on, and ask him to do, I forget the exact words, the legal language he said. He goes, ask him to do this. So then I turned around and I asked the attorney, I'm like, hey, I know this is incorrect, but, I was speaking with, my in-house counsel, and they mentioned that we should attempt to do this. And she comes back to me. She's like, okay, let me just run that by the attorney, but it sounds like that's something that's viable. So it's kind of like your kid asking for a cookie. The first time you say no, don't always accept no, because they certainly don't. Ask, follow up or ask somebody else. Like, they asked me for the cookie. It's usually the other way. It's usually ask mom. She says no. Ask dad. Oh, sure, go ahead.
I'll get it, Andy. Yeah. 9 o'clock at night. Sure, go ahead.
But I just, reiterate sometimes, there's issues that come up. There's typically always a solution. It's just trying to find out who to go to. And that's really one of the things that people that to get advanced in this business, it's just knowing who to go to. And a lot of times the answer actually is an attorney or somebody else, because we aren't the experts, like Jamie mentioned.
Yeah.
Yep.
So.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Justin, thanks for joining us today. Enjoyed having you on. Any final thoughts, and also let people know how to reach out to you, a little bit more about your podcast. I know you have a meetup group as well that meets monthly. You can share information on that before we end this episode.
Sure. Thanks. Thanks for having me on. I always love to be a part of people's podcasts and stuff, and also learn from you guys as well. So thanks for sharing what you did. And obviously thanks, Chris, for being on our show before as well. And Jamie, we'll definitely have to have you on now, just so that, good. Chris doesn't one up you here.
Yeah.
But
wouldn't be the first time, but.
So the name of our podcast is the Two Wealth Show. It's the number 2 Wealth Show. It's on all podcast directories. If you go to the BrightPath Notes YouTube channel, you're going to see all of our recorded video streams of that podcast, and then also our monthly broadcast we do, which is basically like a glorified meetup, except it's all online. And we keep it to streaming only now because we have such a large reach of audience across the U.S. now that it's just easier to control it that way. So we record all of those as well. We've had guests on like Chris as well, and other people in the note business that you guys would recognize. And the best way to get a hold of me is reach out to me via email. It's just my first name, Justin, Justin, at brightpathnotes.com. That's BrightPathnotes.com, Justin at brightpathnotes.com. And I'd be happy to answer questions. Kind of my good deed is what I do is I kind of pay it forward with my education and knowledge. I'm totally happy to, just like, Chris and Jamie, to share my experiences and help you out in any way I can. If there's a chance we can do business together, great. But at the end of the day, I want you to know what I think is the right thing to do in a situation. And I look forward to helping anyone out that needs help.
Okay. That's great. Jamie, Justin. Final thoughts?
This has been great. I might have to listen to this one again. Added a lot of value.
Well, again, Justin, thank you for having us. Thank you for coming on the Good Deeds Note.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Good Deeds Note Investing Podcast. And for listeners, as always, feel free to download and share this on your favorite listening station and platform. Thank you all.